Hello and welcome back to the X-Files Revisited. We are moving on quickly with season 6. We are now up to episode 17, which is called Milagro, which after extensive research, I can now tell you, is Spanish for miracle.
And if you'd have just watched the episode, you'd have got told.
Yeah. Well, I'd already done my hours of research by that point, Brian, so,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, an episode that, last week I couldn't really tell you a right lot about because I remember it being a bit of a stinker, which is why it's not been on. It's not been high on my rewatch. So yeah, I've never really rewatched it all that much. Probably once. So yeah, given my memory of it, and given that you've now watched it, and given a very uneducated guess as to where the rest of X-Files fandom stand, where do you think this sits amongst the 217 episodes in the IMDb ranking?
well, considering I seem to be getting worse at this, it's a miracle that I actually got one right at one point, which
Yeah.
I still can't believe happened. I'm going to guess 129
Oh,
miles away.
it's 139, so not too far out. Only 10. But yeah, just aimed a little lower. But yeah, 139. So
Wow.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
I've seen some pretty decent episodes rated way lower than that. So it's all subjective, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Let's get into it.
let's get into it. Yep. So we open up with John Hawkes. For anyone who knows actor John Hawkes, I know most notably for me, he was in a film called Me, You, and Everyone I Know, or Everyone We Know, which was a really nice little indie film back in the late 90s or early 2000s. That was pretty good in that. That's the one of his that really stuck with me. I know he was in one as well where he played this. Was it like a paraplegic or something? And
Yes.
yeah, I've still not seen that one yet. But
Yeah, that's not great.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't a fan of it. I know John Hawkes is the guy from Dusk Till Dawn.
From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah, he's in the shop at the start of it.
Oh yes, of course. Oh man, I'd so forgotten that.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, but okay. He's one of those character actors where you know his face, you know you've seen him in something, but probably don't know what. I think he may have been in Winter's Bone as well, but
Yeah, he's always good.
yeah,
He's just
just reliable in it. Just like
yeah.
he's if the film's gonna be bad, it's not gonna be because of him.
Yep.
So, but we open up on him, and he is a writer, it seems, who has writer's block. He's sat at his typewriter, and he's got no clue. He's just like, getting really frustrated. So he decides to rip his heart out.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do, casually. Just, pulls the old heart out. And then we cut from there to him disposing of something in the boiler room, and he gets into a lift joined by Scully all of a sudden. There's a kind of like an awkward sexual tension, and by sexual tension I mean he starts leering at her, and we see what he's looking at in close up. So we see her lips and close ups of her eyes and stuff. And they both get out of the lift. So Scully first, and then the man follows. So again, looking a bit creepy. But then the man stops short of following Scully all the way, next door to Mulder's apartment, where he enters his own apartment. And I gotta say, at the opening, again, completely having no memory of this episode, other than the fact that this dude was a writer. I forgot that it was that he lived next door to Mulder. But even in
Right.
his in his apartment at the beginning, I was like, because I remembered a lot of this episode being set in that apartment, like it was just one of those cheapos where we need to do like a self-contained kind of episode just to
Yeah.
save on a bit of budget. It's not really that at all, but for some reason that's what I remembered. And then when it opens up at the beginning and said apartment looks identical to Mulder's apartment, just with fewer things in it, I was like, oh man, they really are scrimping on the budget, because they're just using the Mulder's apartment set and passing it off to someone else. But then obviously it makes more sense once you realise the fact that, oh no, this dude actually lives next door to Mulder, so his apartment is going to be pretty much identical. Scully asks Mulder about his new neighbour before whipping out some autopsy reports, and they have
so it's just fun. It's like it's at the end of this opening sequence just to whip out the things they have a conversation about it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think he's listening in, the guy, I think so. But
like it's one of those openings where I don't know where the hell the story's going. You know, it's a curiosity, because he's listening to this bloody talk. He's a writer who has to rip out his own heart at the start of this one, which I kind of like that on the nose metaphor that they kind of throw in there. I love the fixation of Scully. Like, I can completely understand it.
Yeah, well, I mean, take me back to my what would I have been, 19-year-old self around when this came out. That was me. I was John Hawkes in that lift, so I had a major thing for Gillian Anderson at that point. It was like,
I thought you meant just in real life. I was wondering if there's going to be a cold case getting brought up here and past things that you had done in your history.
No, moving on. I had a bit of a fixation on the old Gillian Anderson back in the late 90s. So very relatable.
I think that was just you and the rest of the world, if I believe.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. It's around the time she was getting voted sexiest woman alive in FHM and all that business. So I wasn't alone in my obsession. But so Mulder suggests psychic surgery. Scully says no, as we would expect, and the man next door listens in. And just as we get Scully's final words, which are, you find his motive and you find the murderer. So, so we've got this murderer doing the rounds, ripping people's hearts out, which, given that we've just seen this dude rip his own heart out, it's like, oh, obvious suspect.
Yep.
So she's like, no, it's not psychic surgery, Mulder. Don't be ridiculous. Find the motive, find the murderer. Boom.
Yeah.
So then we go to the man smoking in bed. Seems unable to sleep. He's just lying there staring at the ceiling, as we've all done from time to time. Cut to Lover's Lane, where two lovers in a car, or one seems to fancy himself as a lover. The lady's kind of like, no. Just stop here. And they have a quarrel, and then she gets out. She kind of wanders off, and then he gets out to go and try and follow her and talk to her, but he gets stopped by a man in a hoodie who looks a little bit like the writer, but we can't quite see. And then he screams. Yeah.
Yes.
Just starts screaming. And it's one of them ridiculous scenes where he gets his heart pulled out, and then we have this focus pull where we see the heart in a hand, the guy's still screaming, and we pull the focus to him, and he's lay there on the floor looking up at his own heart being squeezed and still screaming, and I'm just like, I call BS on that.
Yeah, you could go call BS on that, but you could also say like it's I mean I take these as it's skewed reality because it's not real.
Yeah.
It's writer's privilege, the kind of
Yeah. This is the way he's seeing it play out in his mind, kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit forgiving. What can't be forgiving is the fact that after
The
the match, he said
16-year-old. Yeah. No, see, and yeah, I didn't want you to steal that from me because I was getting to it. I had it in big bold letters here. I'm like, who the hell are you trying to kid? 16-year-old, my ass. This is the
Not a chance
same
in hell.
dude, right? This is the same dude. I don't know if you noticed, but the actor playing this guy, he's the same dude who, way back in Talitha Kumi, the final episode of season 4, he's the one who gets shot in the restaurant, and then what's his face puts the palm of his hand on him and heals him.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Same dude. So he didn't even look 16 back then, and this is 2 years later. So you ain't fooling no one. 16 years old, my ass.
But I do love the way they try and de-age him by just sticking a varsity jacket on him, and they're just done. Nailed it. This guy's now 16 years old.
That kind of became the formula for Smallville, didn't it?
Yeah. Stubble and a bald spot and a dead look in his eye. He's 16.
Oh man, good grief. Yeah. As soon as the cop said that 16-year-old boy, I'm just like, what? If I'd have been drinking, I'd have literally gone.
I went back. I was like, nope, there's no 16. Okay.
Oh man, whatever. 16-year-old. Good grief. Yeah. So Scully gets to the office and Mulder calls to tell her about the dead 16-year-old. She finds an envelope in the office, opens it, and there's a heart pendant inside. Literally a pendant of a heart. Then we get the writer's voiceover kind of beginning over the top of this scene as it bleeds into another scene where as he types Scully's thoughts, it's like he's in Scully's head and he's kind of he's typing what she's thinking, like as if he's writing about her, but she and then we're seeing her and she does seem to actually be thinking those things. Yeah, it's a bit like if you've ever seen the film Stranger Than Fiction, which is one of my favourite movies of all time. And now that I've just mentioned that, I wouldn't be surprised if the writer of Stranger Than Fiction, whose name escapes me at the moment, didn't get the idea for that film from this episode of The X-Files. But yeah. So Scully shows Mulder the Milagro, which is the pendant, which is like a charm, which means miracle, as you say, with all your great research. He dismisses it as being to Scully from a secret admirer, rather than something I can't read in my own handwriting. Oh, a taunt, rather than a taunt from the killer. Mulder tells her she's got another autopsy booked in, and she tells him, essentially, to piss off. Not in so many words, but it's kind of like, dude, stop running my life.
It's not so much running her life, it's like being his lackey. You just think, I've booked you something I need. Go and do it.
Yeah. It's just like autopsy girl. Like, who do you think I am, and who do you think you are? So yeah, she doesn't go to the autopsy just yet. She goes to a church to look at a painting. The writer shows up and explains the meaning of the painting, then gives a creepy monologue about how he's taken with Scully, making himself sound like a proper stalker. How does she not arrest him right here? That is my question.
See, I look here and wherever else he appears in the episode, he has this, I'd say, quiet intensity about him, but I never feel that it's threatening in any way.
It's kind of magnetic. It's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? where it's imbued with like a mystery kind of a
Right.
mystery about him that is
Uh-huh.
yeah, very
And I would
intriguing.
also, yeah, and when he talks, there is a very frank and openness that's very unusual in
Yeah,
Everybody Nowhere. There's no hidden meanings here. He is saying exactly what he's
yeah,
thinking, which is it would be very alarming. I guess if somebody just started doing that to you, know, you'd
yeah.
be in the back foot.
Yeah, it's like they just
Which,
said the quiet bit out loud. It's like,
yeah,
what's that's a bit weird.
yeah.
Yeah, if
It's kind
more
of weird, but
people did
it's
it.
all flattering, and I like it. But
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
weird. But yeah, tell me more.
yeah, yeah. So I can't remember the exact thing he said about the church, but about the painting. But I remember it sounding like total
I think
hokum.
it was
And
Mary Magdalene. Jesus took her heart out, burned it, or refreshed it in his own fire, and gave it back to her.
right, it's just the way.
Purified by fire.
Yeah, it's just the way you just explained it
Yeah,
sounds way less heretical than the way he explained it. Because the way
yeah,
he explained it made it sound like there was some kind of, I don't know, sexual tension between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. I didn't like where it was going.
I
I did.
didn't
I
get
did.
that.
Did you not get that at all? I don't know. It just
No,
the way that he was. Because he said burned with passion, and you don't tend to use that expression outside of any kind of sexual context. Like I know we refer to the death of Christ on the cross as the passion, but we don't tend to say that he burned with passion for particularly in reference to like
yeah,
a woman or whatever like that. So it was getting dangerously close for me to being a bit kind of like, oh, where are you going with this? It's making me nervous. I don't like this. But yeah, I think the general gist was that Mary Magdalene wasn't a complete woman. Jesus took her heart, molded her into something new. So it's kind of a metaphor for the way in which Jesus changed her. But the way it was explained was just a bit too creepy for my
right.
So Scully goes to the autopsy and apologizes to Mulder and tells him about the creepy neighbor. He says like, yeah, you were right. It wasn't a taunt from the killer. It was a secret admirer. But like, what I don't get is why at this point she isn't thinking, how do we know it's not both?
Yes.
How, because this does kind of stink of both
Mhm.
here. It reeks. The timing is impeccable for a start. Little heart pendant coming along as we're working a case about someone ripping out hearts, and he is a bit creepy. He is a little bit on the nose with the way he talks.
Yeah,
So
but I think this is the problem for Scully is because he's so direct and he's making his intentions perfectly clear. She is completely on the back foot, and she's not assessing the situation as I'd say like an FBI agent should be. Like,
mm,
this is someone that's kind of rocked her a little bit and
yeah,
is flattering her at the same time. And
yeah,
that openness is something that's probably missing from her life. She doesn't have that partnership out with of Mulder.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
she doesn't have a kind of love life or a personal life. It seems at times.
Or at least she feels like she doesn't. Um,
Definitely.
it's like, yeah, I think she kind of doesn't realize that she has it, but what she's missing is the romance
Mm.
angle, I think. But yeah. So
And the fact that this guy seems to know her so completely. Every time he
yeah,
opens his mouth, like it's shocking her how in depth he can read her thoughts and feelings.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, not helped by the fact that he's, basically told her that he tried moving next door to her, but there was no apartments available,
Yeah.
so he did the next best. It's like, come on,
But
dude.
like it
Creepy.
also leads to a kind of thought of, does she feel this way, or is he writing her this way?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is there something going on that's making her act this way because of the way he's writing it?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. True. So Mulder takes some of Philip Paget's mail. So we finally get a name for the writer. His name is Philip Paget. And Mulder does some, what I can only assume is illegal searching of the mailbox. Just takes some of his mail before getting in a lift with him and exchanging some barbs. It's like a nice little kind of exchange where the writer guy says something to Mulder, Mulder says something back, and then they get out of the lift, and then the writer says something to Mulder, and then Mulder kind of repeats back to him what he'd previously just said, and it's like that, the age-old territorial pissing that men do when we know that there's a woman involved, but we don't want to just come out
I think
and
there's
say
I think there's a nice punchline to this though, because as they go into their proverbial rooms, their own rooms, that the writer says, as Mulder intended to break the federal law and open my mail. like Mulder thought he was being kind of sly about it, and this guy knew the whole time.
Yeah. And again, is that because he wrote it? Did Mulder do it because he wrote it? Oh, yeah. So Philip types about Scully's fantasy of going to bed with him, while Mulder opens the mail. It turns out to be a telephone bill, which shows absolutely 0 calls, to which Mulder refers to the guy as Mr. Popularity. And then Mulder starts to read the paper. Scully arrives. She hears Philip typing. She's kind of on her way to Mulder's, but she hears Philip typing. So rather than carrying on to Mulder's, out of curiosity, she knocks on Philip's door. She tries to return the Milagro to him, but he says she's curious about him. Again, that whole, getting into her head, knowing exactly what she's thinking. You see the look on her face, which suggests, yes, she clearly is curious about him. He asks her out for a coffee, and when she says that loneliness is a choice, so they have a bit of a conversation about loneliness, because his apartment is just like nothing but a bed and a typewriter. So she makes a reference about loneliness, and he kind of redirects it at her. She says, "Oh, I'm not lonely," and so he's like, "Okay, then, well, do you want a coffee?" So, yeah. And then we have a little cutaway just to bridge that gap of her going in the apartment of Mulder getting more newspapers. This guy really likes the news.
Yes, he's a hoarder. He's definitely a hoarder.
Philip tells Scully he's writing about her, says he moved in to be close to her, asks her to stay a while. She says she feels uncomfortable, which is a pretty fair statement. He blows a light bulb and goes to get another one. Then,
she's at "Where will we sit?"
Yeah.
Without any seats in the apartment, and then he's like, "Well, let's go to the bedroom."
Come over here, past the bed. Yeah.
But she's complicit in everything.
Yeah.
But is she? Like, is this part of the story? Is she just that curious?
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
So they sit down on the bed, and he goes and gets another light bulb, and he fits it in, and sits down with her, and then the new bulb blows. And then at that point, Mulder bursts in and arrests.
Hang on, there's a great point here that I love. It's just one of those throwaway lines I thought was terrific. Where he's like, "Why don't you come down?"
That.
Like, what? No,
go on.
Just it says, "Come and sit here," and she's like, she says, I can't remember what she says, but he goes, "You're armed."
Oh yeah, you've got a gun. Yeah.
Is it just before he goes and gets a light bulb? But it's so like haphazardly, and it's not like threatening or worried. It's just like, "You're armed." Sit down.
Yeah. You've got a gun. It's put one in me if you feel the urge. Yeah. So so it looks like they're
on their way.
They're on the way. They're on the way there, and then Mulder cock blocks them and busts in and arrests Philip. So yeah. Mulder questions Philip, but all his answers are both vague and yet incriminating. It's like there's a certain sense of vagueness about everything he's saying, and yet you kind of like, if I read between the lines here, you're like, it doesn't look good for you, mate. So does Mulder like the book? That's the question that Philip answers. So he's taken his book that he's been writing, and Philip's like, do you like it? Mulder says maybe if it were fiction. Scully takes Mulder by the arm gently and leaves, which is a very key moment, because it's in that moment that Philip obviously, like, he sees the love there between Scully and Mulder. So a kind of love that he realizes is never going to be on the cards between him and Scully. So Mulder leaves, says he's going to look for the accomplice, because there clearly must be an accomplice. Scully says she's already done so, says the man has been dead for 2 years. Now, I didn't quite get how they got to the accomplice, to be honest.
Neither did I.
I didn't quite get the link. Now, I'm sure there was some tenuous link there about something was mentioned about this guy previously. But yeah, I didn't get it. I didn't get how they got from Philip to this dude that Scully has now found out about and learnt has apparently died. So I'm sure if I watched it again and looked out for that, it would all become clear. So yeah, apparently this dude has been dead for 2 years. She suggests Padgett didn't kill these people, but rather got so deep into the killer's head that he was able to predict everything.
Yes, and that's because he's got so deep into her head.
Yeah.
But even, like, you feel as if, come on, Scully, you're reaching here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is she reaching because there's an attraction there, or is she reaching because she's experienced firsthand just how this guy can indeed get into your head? So yeah, Mulder infers that Scully, in that case, may have been on her way to getting down and dirty with Padgett because he wrote it in his book. And she's like, I gotta read me that.
It's almost like, what? No.
No way, man. So Scully does indeed read the book. A guard comes in and gives her something Padgett has written, an inner monologue of the girl from Lover's Lane just before she's attacked and killed. So yeah, another victim while Padgett is in prison. So he's clearly not the guy who's done it himself. So, crime scene, no body. Mulder says they're being jerked around before seeing a man that looks like the description from the writings. This was a little bit vague. You kind of have to bring the information yourself. But it doesn't take much to bring it. Obviously, Mulder's read Padgett's book, so he knows how the murderer is described in the book. So without coming out and telling us, well, I read the description in the book and he looks like this, they give the audience credit for being intelligent enough to make that that leap. So he goes after this guy, kind of knocks him to the floor. It's not quite the guy, because he's just someone who works on the site. But then Mulder checks the truck that this guy's working at.
Can I paint a picture for you here, Brian? So
Go on.
they're at this supposed crime scene at the graveyard where they think something has happened. There's a little bit sign of a struggle. There are lots. It looks as if there's a good few agents about. Yeah. So it's broad daylight. There's a good few people about there. Some guy runs up in his truck that says cemetery gardener. Gets out with his jacket on that's got the cemetery gardener across the back of it. just walking about his work, just going to go and clean up some of this. When all of a sudden Mulder just rugby tackles him. Like, this guy's just doing his job. Like, loads of police, not a care in the world. All of a sudden, Mulder's on top of him. Just be like, that's somebody I can beat up.
But it does bear the question: why isn't this guy arrested?
Yeah,
because they find the body in the back of his truck, all buried under stuff. It's like, come on, okay? He is prime suspect, surely. It's like Mulder just tackled this guy to the ground. It's like, okay, yeah, it's not. It doesn't quite fit the description, except for the dead body in the back of his truck.
Yeah,
like it couldn't really be any more incriminating, surely.
it's almost like a Scooby-Doo episode at this point. You know, just like jump on that guy and then just like, ta-da, body.
It's like we got a comment at the beginning, somewhere in the beginning of this. I think, did someone ask him, would I know any of your books? And the guy's like, no, they've not been all that great, to be honest, except this one. This one's really good. I've got a feeling this one isn't that good. I've got a feeling that if this is how he's writing it, then it's really not as good as he likes to think it is. As much as he's able to get in the heads of people, or at least implant whatever he's writing into people's heads, which at this point feels like the more plausible explanation, I would suggest that he's actually writing another lame-ass crime fiction book, because, like I say, Mulder just tackled this guy, checked his truck, the body is in there, and then nothing else is mentioned about him. It's like, dude, you got a body in the back of your truck. It's like,
but it's the magic of this episode is, and there's no explanation, but there's a duality to everything of, is it their own actions or is it not? Because there is no reason to stop this guy. Mulder has no reason to stop him. So was it Mulder that decided to stop him, or was it written that he stops him?
No, I mean, like there is reason for him to stop him, because Mulder's read the book that Padgett wrote, in which the killer will have been described as a man in a grey hoodie. And that's what he sees, a man in a grey hoodie. So,
yeah, but then it also leads to the bigger question, because this is one of those ones that gets locked in my head, and I'm like, is any of this happening at all? You can argue that it's all just a fictitious in this guy's head.
You could do. I like to think that it is happening, but I like the way I see it is that it's not that he's so good at getting in people's heads so much as it is that whatever he writes happens. So Scully is feeling the way she's feeling because he's writing it. And that's why when he sees Scully take Mulder's hand, he kind of changes his tack, and any feelings Scully might have towards him suddenly dissipate, because that's the way he's writing it. Yeah, so I just think the guy mentions at some point, I'm sure, that his other books.
Yeah, he's been a conversation with Scully.
Yeah, so he mentions flat, and I don't think that's by chance. I think that there's a certain element here where you can say this dude is a bad fiction writer. It's just so happens that what he's writing right now is coming true. Whatever he writes happens, but because he's a bad fiction writer, the stuff that's happening starts getting a little bit out of whack. Yeah. So on the way to Padgett's cell, Mulder and Scully have a bit of a disagreement, as Scully is trying to defend Padgett's innocence. Which, again, is she, is that because he's thinking it, that's how he's writing her in his head, or does she have an attachment to this guy?
Yeah.
And if she does have an attachment to this guy anyway, it's only because of how he's, so it's all like looped. It's like, which came first, chicken or the egg? So they let Padgett go, and they say they made a mistake. Padgett says he did too, and that Scully is already in love. And that's obviously because he saw earlier, he saw the way she touched Mulder's hand to calm him down. And I feel like it's at this point that it's essentially him who's dropped Scully. And it's like, if I can't have her, then no one can, kind of deal. So he goes back to his apartment where the killer is waiting. He wants to know what his motive is. Padgett doesn't know, but it seems his creation came alive. So it seems to make very clear here that although we do see, like, literally in the next scene, Mulder and Scully sit next door surveilling Padgett, who just sits at his desk. So, like, presumably their surveillance setup took place after this moment, because obviously he's just come straight back home. Then he sees the killer, has a bit of a convo, and then Mulder and Scully get back to their apartment and set up surveillance. Although you think they'd set up the surveillance stuff.
Oh no! I never got that. So I got it as they talked about it in the car. They decided to set up the surveillance and then they let him out. So the killer wasn't there. Like, they're watching the video while he's having the conversation. And he's having a conversation with the killer, and when it cuts back to them, they see him just sitting at his desk, not moving.
Right.
So I took it as it's all within his mind.
And see, that's the thing that I think. Like, in a minute, Scully will see the killer, and that's only because Padgett writes that she's seen the killer, because he's writing that the killer goes in and tries to attack Scully, but because he's not written in the book that
he talks to him,
they
see him talking to him.
Yeah, so he's not in the book talking to the killer. This is kind of outside of the book, so to speak, as he's in a monologuing, I guess, with the killer. And because of that, it's like, well, no one else can see him at that point. So, yeah. So his creation says that the love in Padgett's heart is imperfect, and that there is only one real ending to his story: kill Scully. So there is a whole kind of dynamic within the episode about man's imperfect love, man's inability to love in a perfect way, which obviously harkens back to the painting of Christ, in which we get supposedly the only human being who ever loved in the perfect way. So that's mirrored alongside Padgett's inability to love in a perfect way. So, so Padgett leaves. Mulder follows him, and he stops him down in the basement from burning his book, which is actually a mistake, because if he'd let him burn his book, it'd have been better for everyone. Because Scully gets her boots on, opens the door, and is attacked by the killer. She gets off some shots, but they just seem to go right through the killer. So he grabs her and starts strangling her. Mulder runs upstairs as Padgett burns his book. When Mulder gets to Scully, the killer is gone, and Scully sobs into Mulder's arms. So it's like she gets attacked by this guy, and then when Padgett burns the book, the guy just poof disappears. Because the book is no more. So, like I say, if Mulder had just like, "What you doing?" "Oh, just burning my book." "Okay, go right ahead." It'd have been like, there'd have been no issue. So,
and we finish on Padgett's dead body.
Yeah, so Padgett lies next to the furnace, heart in hand, as his voiceover talks about him giving the love that he could not receive in his final act. So there's this notion there that rather than allow Scully to be killed by his creation, he loved her enough to kill both his work and himself instead. So.
And I mean, there could be nothing here, but I keep wandering back to the picture in the church, the opening sequence when he burns his own heart, rips out his heart and burns it, whether he's trying to cleanse it. whether that's him visually selling his soul to write a good book, which, because at the end he gives up the book and gets his heart back burned type thing. And I don't know if there's more in it or not that I'm just not picking up on, but yeah, it's an interesting finale to an interesting episode. Do you want me to wrap up on this one?
Yeah, go on.
I loved this episode. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a fantastic one. Very subdued and different. I thought the main bad guy, if you want to call him that, was someone that was very unusual in the X-Files, as in he didn't seem to have badness in him. It was only love that he seemed to have, like, throughout the episode, even though the characters he's creating are doing bad things. But that's just the story, that the construct that he makes up. I like this kind of Scully who's almost soul searching her way through a personal life that seems to have vacated her, and she's obviously getting older. She's had some past trauma. She's got a man in her life, but there's no kind of romance there. I loved all that. I think John Hawkes is terrific. There is an intensity to him when he's just staring at somebody, which I really kind of like. But I never felt threatened by him. I almost felt like a kind of curiosity to that character. I absolutely adored this episode, and going into it this isn't great, this is a forgettable one. I felt that this was a terrific episode that I really, really enjoyed. I think I'm going to give it a 4.5, Brian.
Okay. All right. So I'll say this much: it is not the episode I remembered it being. Like, again, this was another one of those Brian's been smoking crap instances. It's far from being a perfect episode, because I do think there's a lot of like bits where it's kind of like, well, is that written intentionally that way because we're meant to read into it this stuff, or is it just bad writing, or what? And again, there's certain conversations in it that are written so intensely that they kind of give a meaning or lean towards a meaning that I'm a bit uncomfortable with. But as an episode, I feel like it was quite entertaining. I thought John Hawkes was a really good guest star who had the right amount of intensity, like creepy in the way that he should be. Like not a Donny Faster kind of creepiness, but the kind that kind of lures you in, where you're like, there's something off about this guy, but I kind of want to know more. Kind of creepiness. And obviously it's a Scully-centric episode to a degree. I like seeing her kind of step out from the usual and maybe have a slight dalliance with someone else, but without ever even committing to first base. It's good. It's intriguing. I think it's a bit deeper than perhaps I'd remembered it being, in terms of themes about the human heart and our ability to love, and how no matter what, our love is imperfect, and just notion of sacrifice as well, that this guy is, and his is kind of like the story of a lot of writers, really, in a way. I think this is how a lot of writers see themselves, that you've got to kill your darlings. There's that whole notion, killing your darlings and things like that, and he essentially has to kill his whole book in order to, because of the love he has for this woman, or feels like he has for this woman. So it is deeper than I thought. And I remembered as well, last week when I was thinking about it, for some reason I remembered this guy reading poetry and stuff. And I think it's because of the voiceovers. So obviously we have a lot of voiceovers where he's reading the inner monologues, and for some reason I just remembered that as being like this kind of slightly over the top poetic kind of procrastination about things, that almost in a the field where I died kind of way. but it is far from that. I mean, it's not even poetry. It's just like he's just reading what people are thinking essentially, but it's the way he's written them. So a much better episode than I thought, but still not perfect. But highly entertaining. I will watch it again. I'd give it at this point a 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up my top 5. Okay. And with that, let's move on to tell me a little bit about episode 19, The Unnatural.
So this one, I do believe it's written by David Duchovny.
Ooh.
But I think it's also the first episode he directed.
A labour of love, then.
Kind of, yeah. And no, I do rate Duchovny as a writer. I think whenever he's written on the show before, like the mythology stuff, like the mythology episodes that he's had input in have been some of the best. This is good. It's one of them episodes, a little bit like Travellers, where Mulder and Scully aren't in it a right lot, but the times where they are in it, like there's some really iconic kind of Mulder Scully moments in it that a lot of fans like really love. But it's following a story about someone else a lot of the time, about an alien that's living amongst us as one of us, and it's kind of his story really, and Mulder and Scully are just weaved in and out a few bits. I can't remember if it's like they're at the beginning and they're at the end, but then the rest of the episode is just about this guy. Again, that could just be terrible memory on my part, but yeah, I think it'll be one of them. It's funny. It's got humor in there, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a comedy episode. But I think it's all going to hinge on whether or not the story with this guy who's an alien trying to fit in among us is strong enough to warrant the lack, for the most part, of Mulder and Scully.
Okay.
Or, of course, we could get to it next week and find out that Mulder and Scully are in nearly every scene and I'm just remembering it completely.
I'd say that's most likely. Okay, there we have it. So, we hope you loved Milagro. Join us next week where we talk about The Unnatural, which I'm interested in now. If you don't mind, give us a like on YouTube, rate and review us on any podcast service that you listen to us on, because that would be fantastic. Allow other people to discover us, and we'll see you next week on the X-Files Revisited.